One of the, I would say, maybe lesser known, but very fundamental texts of the yoga tradition is called the Sankhya Karika. And the text itself is lesser known, but the philosophy that it presents is very widespread. It's in the Upanishads, it's in the Puranas, it's in the Mahabharata, it's these assumptions, the basic assumptions about reality that the Sankhya Karika presents show up everywhere. In the Yoga Sutras, like you can't really understand the Yoga Sutras without understanding Sankhya. You can't really understand the Gita without understanding Sankhya. And the question of the Shvetashvatara Upanishad makes very direct reference to Sankhya philosophy. The Sankhya Karika, it's basically understood as a later text of a tradition that goes back farther. And there's a sage named Kapila who's credited with being the father of Sankhya philosophy. Nobody knows when he lived or whether he was a real person or anything like that. But that's the sense of the tradition. But the Sankhya Karika condenses, it's like all these texts, I think I've said this before, many of them, they take a whole lot of different things that are going on at the time. The Bhagavad Gita does this and kind of gathers them up and says like, okay, here's what we think. It's like a collection, a synthesis, a summary. And the Sankhya Karika also was heavily influenced Buddhism. So Buddhism came around this time, came into this mix. We think of Buddhism and Hinduism as two different things. They're really, it's not a black and white, that would be considered two different things like that. And I think I mentioned at some point the Brahmanical tradition, right? The Brahmanas are this kind of coalescence of rules and rituals. And the Brahmin class comes in and they say, we are the priests, we can talk to God. You guys don't know all the secret formulas. So you know what you can do? You can pay us and we will hook you up. It's like common in spiritual traditions around the world. That happens, part of human evolution. So that happened. And somewhere along the way, some group of people were like, you know what? No, I don't think so. And those are the yogis. And there was a name that was given to a particular group of kind of original yogis called Shramanas. And Shramana means like striving. It's like the word means like effort. Like the people who are trying, the people who are efforting, the people who are, and so Buddha was a Shramana. He came from that tradition. And the Upanishads came from the Shramanas. The later Upanishads came from the Shramana traditions. And the Yoga Sutras came from the Shramana traditions. So these are like, you can think, the ashram, the word ashram is place of the Shramanas. So that's where that comes from. So there were these ashrams. So this is around the time that civilization was developing. And cities were getting bigger and people were kind of condensed into these, there's agriculture, so people can trade and people can become rich and people can become poor. And, there's the breakdown of the traditional indigenous systems, cultures, and all this stuff is happening. And this group, and the Brahmins are kind of taking power and all that stuff. And the Shramanas left. They went out. They said, no, we're going to go away from this stuff and seek the truth. Seek this flame of truth that the Veda talks about. We talked about the Gayatri mantra. Tatsaviturvarenyam bhargo devasya dhimahi. This is a call to this light. And the Brahmins are saying, if you want to call to the light, it'll cost you $5.50. And the Shramanas were like, no, I don't think so. I'm going to go and call to the light. And we'll group together and we'll try some different things. And so different groups of Shramanas tried different things. They tried hanging upside down for a long time from a tree. They tried doing like this for the rest of their life until their arm just stuck up that way. They tried sticking a thing through their tongue and pulling hard things with it. They tried smearing themselves with ash and sitting under the sun or surrounded by fire, with a fire on their head. All kinds of, they tried these weird hatha yoga positions, You guys might know some of them. This is where all this came from, was from this kind of rich Shramana space where there was a lot of experimentation, a lot of ashrams, and people communicating on different levels. And again, this Buddhism came from this space. And it was a bit of a response. And, you know, the reason why we think of Buddhism as against Hinduism is all of this was a response to the accretion of this religion, which at the time was not called Hinduism, but it was called life. It was called the Dharma, you know, the Sanatana Dharma. The Vedic ecosystem produced all these different ideas, all these different paths. And the reason I say that Buddhism is not against the Vedas is because it was a response to the consolidation and rigidification of power structure. But it wasn't necessarily against the Vedas, the wisdom of the Veda itself. And some traditions, you know, did more to say, forget about that, than others. But most of them honored the Veda. And so out of this Shramana tradition, there's basically 6 different philosophical schools. And the article that I wrote that is in the book goes through all that. And I'm not going to get too deep into these other ones. Sankhya is the first one. Sankhya is the first of the philosophical schools, kind of historically and iteratively to happen. It influenced the other ones. And then there's Buddhism and Jainism. So there's 6 astika, like orthodox schools, and then there's Buddhism and Jainism, which are considered unorthodox. And the first verse of the Sankhya Karika basically says, I mean, you can hear the ring of Buddhism in it. It's like, because of the 3 kinds of pain, there arises a desire to get out of it. Because we're suffering, because life is hard, there arises the need, the desire to be free from suffering. And basically it says, some people say the Vedas are the way out, but I don't know, we're still suffering. So it doesn't seem to be working. So that's the beginning. It's like they delineate between the Vedas and Vyakta Avyakta Gya Vijnana. Vijnana is like understanding, wisdom, like, you know, discrimination. It's like the understanding, the ability to discern the difference between that which is manifest, that which is unmanifest, and that which knows, that which witnesses, that which sees. So the manifest world, the unmanifest reality, that which has no form, and the one that perceives it. So they're saying there's that, and then there's all this Vedic ritualism stuff. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to understand that. We're going to try to understand the nature of reality, and not this ritualism stuff, because it's not working. And they say other things about the rituals as well, like that they're subject to impurity and excess, and you know, it's kind of manipulation. Dukkhatraya abhighata, the 3 kinds of suffering. So because of the scorching agony, it's the abhighata is like attack, trauma, torment, because of the scorching torment of the 3 kinds of suffering. And the 3 kinds of suffering are organic suffering that happens because you're sick, or, you know, physical illness or mental illness, or suffering caused by other people or other animals, or suffering caused by the devas, like karma or the fates or whatever. You know, that's how they divide the 3 kinds of suffering. And I'm going to talk, so the thing that's important to know as you move along in your yogic experience, and some of you have been around yoga for a while, there's words that you hear, the gunas. You hear about the gunas. You hear about Purusha and Prakriti. This is where these words come from, is Sankhya. So there's some fundamental words, concepts to general yoga that you will hear that are embedded here, and we're going to go through them. And they're also listed in the article. Sankhya basically means enumeration. So it's like, it's a list in a way, and it's very logical. It's like, because of this, then this, then, I don't know if you ever took a logic class, but I took a logic class in college, right? And it's like this, everything's all about the rules, and Sankhya has that flavor. It's like, this is true because this is true because this is true. And there's this thing called the pramanas, the ways, the legitimate means of understanding something. You can understand something because you see it. You can understand through direct perception. You can understand something because of inference. So I might hear the rain, and I might not feel the rain. I might not see the rain, but I might see rain pouring down the side of a mountain. And so I know it's raining up there. Even though I'm not seeing the rain happening there, I can make an inference. And then the third thing they accept is testimony. So somebody else can tell me. If I call somebody and they say it's raining here, then I know it's raining there. If I trust the person, there's a little tricky there because you have to be able to trust the person. But those are so that's the framework. They set up this framework. These are the three things. In order to know something, you either see it directly, perceive it directly, or you make an inference and you understand it, or somebody tells you. And the Vedas are considered valid testimony. So you can see how the nuance is here. When Sankhya says the Vedas aren't working, they're talking about the ritualism that's not working. They're not talking about the core teachings of the Vedas, which are something different. So we're going to get into all those concepts. I want to tell you a few things about the general message of Sankhya. First of all, you have Purusha and Prakriti, which are the two eternal things in the world, in the universe, in the cosmos, spirit and matter, to simplify. Purusha and Prakriti, spirit and matter. And everything that is associated with matter is unconscious, unfree, bound, limited, and just kind of cascading. It's like one thing leads to another. You know, like the Rube Goldberg machine or dominoes? It's like that. That's how Prakriti works. It's just dominoes. There's no intelligence. There's no capacity to make any choice at all. Now, Purusha is eternally free and conscious, but can't do anything. The Sankhya compares Purusha and Prakriti to the person who can't walk and a person who can't see. Prakriti can't see. It's not conscious. Purusha can't walk, can't do anything. It's just there. It's just a witness, just a pure, absolute witness. It just sees everything, but it can't do anything. So Prakriti, all of creation comes about because Prakriti and Purusha touch each other. They come in contact and then everything happens. That's what sets the dominoes going. And what we experience ourselves to be most of the time, so this ego that we have, this sense of self, is Prakriti. It is not Purusha. It does not have a choice. It is just part of the dominoes cascading. It is, we heard something on the radio and we thought something about it, or we had an experience before and we're reacting to it, or somebody told us something and, it's like the experience of being a free, independent person. I can do whatever I want. I'm free. It's a free country. It's a falsification, according to Sankhya. It's not real. We are just conditioned. We're a ball of conditioning unraveling itself. And that is true as far as, that's as far as ahankar, as far as the ego, as far as that layer of our being. The only way to be free is to sorry, there's some geese. To be a goose flying through the sky. The only way to be free is to touch Purusha, to realize that what we actually are is this free Purusha. So Purusha is free and Ahankar is unfree. But Ahankar is very good at saying, I am free. I am Purusha, actually. There's nothing else besides me. I'm everything. It kind of absorbs that and takes on that role. But it is a falsification. It is not actually telling you the truth. So there's implications to that on the level of personal day-to-day, minute-to-minute experience, you know? When am I making a choice that I think is a free choice, but is just actually a domino, knocking into another domino and continuing on? It takes introspection, humility, and a willingness to be able to see that. Another implication is that all of Sankhya, another kind of message of Sankhya, all of this, everything, all the time, everything that has ever happened in the universe, everything that will ever happen, everything that's happening right now is happening only for the purpose of realization of Purusha, for Purusha to realize itself, for us as individuals to awaken to the truth of who we are, and for everybody, everything to awaken to the fact that it is actually spirit and not just the material. So everything that has ever happened and everything that will ever happen, there's a reason for it, and it is this evolution of the realization of the spiritual realization, the realization that we are endless, eternal spirit. When realization happens, the Sankhya Karika says, virtue and the rest become devoid of their causal efficacy. So basically karma stops. So the karma, we can think of our own lifetime as this domino chain, or we can think of, it goes back. In the Sankhya Karika, there's a word linga. The linga sharira, is the causal body. It's the body that lives beyond lifetimes. And it says basically that it's got, well, we'll get into all the different tattvas, but the only thing that linga lacks is materiality. Earth, air, water, fire, ether. It's got everything else. It can hear, it can see, it can know, it has all the organs of generation. It just doesn't have physicality. So this linga sharira is, if we kind of extrapolate out into, I am not just this lifetime, but I am many lifetimes. I'm this being that travels into different bodies. It goes out of one body and into another body and into another body. Then the domino thing becomes much longer. The Rube Goldberg machine becomes much longer. It stretches back out of this lifetime. And so I'm being influenced right now by things that happened 1,000 years ago in another lifetime. I'm not aware of it, but it's happening. And it is possible to become aware of it. It is possible to be able to say, oh, this is where that started, to trace something back. But mostly we don't have that capacity. But when realization happens, when we touch the Purusha, when we awaken to the truth of who we are, that whole karmic thing stops, it's done. But the potter's wheel keeps spinning for a while. So it's like the pot is done, the potter takes their hand away from the wheel, but the wheel keeps spinning. So that means you don't just die right away. At the moment of realization, the being who has become realized stays embodied. That's the metaphor of the wheel continues spinning. It's just kind of spinning. There's no consequence. There's nothing, it's not accruing karma. And this is also said in the Yoga Sutras. That being isn't doing things that are going to influence something later on, because they have reached the end of the journey. Purusha is never bound, it never lives, it never dies, it never reincarnates. It's the linga sharira, which is part of Prakriti, that lives and dies and reincarnates. And Prakriti offers herself to Purusha. And it is, in the Sankhya Karika, there's a masculine and a feminine. And all the subsequent Shiva Shakti, Vishnu Lakshmi, all that comes from this. And they're direct. If you read the Puranas, if you read the Mahabharata, if you read these different texts where these beings appear, there are very direct references using the same words from the Sankhya Karika. So this kind of polarization, masculine-feminine polarization, is connected to the Sankhya Karika and to Purusha and Prakriti. And Purusha is the male pole, and Prakriti is the female pole. And Prakriti, it's said, offers to herself to Purusha and gets no benefit of her own. It's a sacrifice. It's a willing self-offering. She doesn't get anything from it. And that's love. That's love. So the universe is loving itself all the time. You know, the cosmos, the divine being, this dance of love between the two is the fundamental substratus of reality. And once the seer sees her, once Purusha sees her, it's all over. Once the verse says, as a dancer, having exhibited herself to the spectators, desists from the dance, so does Prakriti, the primal nature, desist, having exhibited herself to the spirit. So it's kind of like Prakriti is actively, everything is for the sake of Purusha. Everything is for the spirit. Everything that exists, the whole dance of creation is for the benefit of the spirit. So these are translations of the words that are used in the Sankhya Karika to describe Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha is, let's start with Prakriti, is non-different, objective, so out there, externalized stuff, common. It's like what we are used to. Unconscious and creative. So the other thing is that Sankhya, all of creation is divided into three different categories. One thing is it is eternal. It is not produced by anything. Prakriti is not produced by anything. Nothing produces Prakriti. She exists forever. She always existed. She always will exist. She exists forever. But she produces some stuff, right? So there's things that are produced by something else, and there's things that are not produced by something else. And some of those things that are produced by something else, like buddhi, is produced by Prakriti. Buddhi also produces ahankar. So there's things that are in the middle that are produced by something, and then they produce something. And this is about evolution. It's like this comes from this, comes from this, comes from this, and it all like the dominoes going out. And then there are things that are produced by something, but they don't produce anything else, right? So I'll give examples of what those are. But Prakriti is the kind of primal creatrix. She's the initiator of creation. So nothing creates her because she exists forever, and she is the initiator of all creation. She creates the first stuff. It's like a wave, you imagine the water, and then a wave starts to form. Like there's a creation happening there, right? Eventually the wave crashes, but at first it's just starting to coalesce into something. That's Prakriti coalescing into what's called Mahat or Buddhi. And Purusha is different from what we normally experience, different from the ordinary, and it's subjective. So it is inside, it's like subjective is I know, I see, I witness, I experience, as opposed to the thing out there that is witnessed, that is experienced. The thing that is experienced is Prakriti. The experiencer is Purusha. That's true inside you. Your thoughts are Prakriti. The thing that sees your thoughts is Purusha. The seer of the thoughts is Purusha. Your emotions are Prakriti. The seer of the experiencer of the emotions is Purusha. So we don't often kind of differentiate like that inside ourselves. Okay, what is the emotion and what is that which sees the emotion? Well, Sankhya says that's two different things, fundamentally, primordially different things. It also says that Purusha, it's not just one Purusha. There's infinite Purushas. So you're your own Purusha, you're your own Purusha, you're your own Purusha, I'm my own Purusha. It's not just one big glob. We actually are differentiated. So this is a dualistic philosophy. And because there's Purusha and Prakriti, and not just dualistic, but multiplistic. Now, this is fundamental Sanskrit, Sankhya 101, Sankhya Karika. So all the other texts, the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, the Katha Upanishad, the Bhagavad Gita, all these other texts, they take this and they take it in a different... The Bhagavad Gita is obviously not dualistic nor atheistic. Sankhya is atheistic fundamentally, because it says there's Purusha and Prakriti. There's not really there's not a personality of a Godhead. There's not a divine being, personality behind all this. The Bhagavad Gita is clear. It says, yes, Purusha and Prakriti exist, and I, Krishna, am the father of those things. I am behind even those. And Shaktism also says that it just flips the Devi is, the mother of all this stuff. And the Shvetashvatara Upanishad is very theistic, very devotional, very beautiful. But it has all these elements, the same philosophical elements, it's just has that added. So, Purusha is conscious, Prakriti is unconscious. Purusha is not creative, it does not create anything. It is neither created nor, this is the third category. And Purusha is the only thing in the third category. It is not created, and it does not create anything.
Mula Prakriti. Mula means root. So this is the primal, creator. When Purusha and Prakriti touch, they come in contact with each other, the gunas are agitated. So the guna means quality. So the gunas are the three qualities that underlie everything in creation. They exist as aspects of Prakriti. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas are the three gunas. And they are collaborative, and they basically when Purusha and Prakriti are not touching each other, they are completely even and balanced. They exist in the same perfect balance, and there's no creation. When they get agitated and they come out of balance, creation happens. And sattva is like friendliness. It's the word priti, friendliness. Rajas is unfriendliness. Is that right? Sattva, where does it say? Priti, apriti, and vishada. Yeah, friendliness, friendly joy, painful enmity, apriti, and dejection is tamas. So these are the words that are used in the Sankhya Karika. There's a lot of different articulations of these gunas, and you've probably heard about sattva and rajas and tamas in your yoga experience, and you may have heard them talked about in different ways. What I'm giving you is the direct translation from the Sankhya Karika, which says Sankhya is friendly joy, illuminating, buoyant. Rajas is desiring, exciting, restless, agitated, painful enmity. And tamas is heavy, obscuring, dejection. And the purpose of the existence of the gunas is illumination, progress, and limitation. So illumination is the purpose of sattva, progress is the purpose of rajas, and limitation is the purpose of tamas. And we have this sense that progress involves pain a lot of the time, difficulty, agitation. And there's a metaphor given in the Sankhya Karika of a lamp. The wick is sattva, the flame is rajas, and the wax is tamas. And they all work together to create the candle. You need to have them all, or else it doesn't work. If you have no wax, the wick will just burn up. Rajas will just burn the whole thing up real quick. So tamas, that limiting factor of tamas, has to be there in order for the thing to exist through time. You have to have the stability of the wick. You have to have the flame, or else there's no light that comes out of the candle. So these are the gunas. And when Prakriti and Purusha touch each other, the gunas become agitated, and this wave starts to form. And this wave is buddhi. This wave is a sense of awareness, a sense of discrimination, a sense of the capacity to discern between one thing and the other. The capacity to discern between something that is evolutionary. This is how it develops. At that point, it's just the capacity for discernment. It develops into the capacity to discern what is evolutionary and what is counter-evolutionary, what is light and what is darkness, what is positive and what for our own development and what is not. The buddhi is the kind of vehicle of that. And then out of the buddhi comes ahankar. And ahankar literally means the I maker. Aham is I am, and kara is that like makes, the thing that makes. So it's like that which creates the experience of I am. We have, Freud has created a whole understanding of what ego is, right? And, psychologists know, Freudian people who have studied Freud know a lot more, but it's kind of pervaded into that. We can't really pull that stuff out. So when we use the word ego often in yoga, we have this whole Freudian thing going on about what ego is. In the yogic sense, ego is that thing, that kind of gravitational force that coalesces into I am. That takes this whole blah universe of like disparate stuff flying in all these directions and I am. I'm not that. I'm this, I'm not that. Right? That's the ahankar. It's the container. And there's nothing, it's not bad. It's not good ego, bad ego, strong ego, weak ego, powerful ego, vulnerable ego. It's none of that. It's just the gravity. It's like you drop something, it's gravity. It's not good gravity, bad gravity. It's just a force. It's the force that coalesces in the sense of I am. I am. And out of ahankar, we have manas, which is the processor. It takes all the sense experience and so, even when I'm saying all this, the thing that you have to remember is that at the point of the evolution of buddhi, there's nothing else, because everything else comes from buddhi. The point of the evolution of ahankar, the sense of self, there's nothing else. There's just I am. There's no seeing, hearing, feeling, fire, water, air, earth, nothing. There's just I am. I am. And out of that I am, the I am creates manas, the tanmatras, the mahabhutas, and the indriyas. And the indriyas are the senses, karmendriyas and the gyanendriyas, the powers of knowledge and the powers of movement, the powers of doing stuff. So the powers, the gyanendriyas are the sense, the eye, sight, hearing, taste, smell, those things. And the karmendriyas are like the hands, the feet, the organs of generation, the capacity to excrete, all that. That's the karmendriyas. So these all come from ahankar. And manas comes from ahankar. And the tanmatras come from ahankar. The tanmatras are the earth, water, fire, primordial earth, water, fire, air, space. Oh no, they create the mahabhuta, sorry. Sound, touch, form, taste, smell. Sound. So we have hearing, which is an indriya, a power. We have sound, which is a tanmatra. And we have space. So these three are all related to each other. Hearing, sound, and space. And the way there's a kind of order, like sound creates, space creates sound. No, sound creates space. Sound creates space. Touch creates air. Yeah. Sound creates space. Touch creates air.
Fire is the sight.
Sight creates light. Taste creates water. Smell creates earth. And if you think about it, I have that written down in a full sentence. I could have just read it. You can't feel, see, taste, or smell space, right? You can't feel space, you can't see it, you can't taste it, you smell it, but you can hear it.
Why can't you feel it?
So you can feel air, but you can't, with your sense organs, with your inner senses, that's different. We have outer senses and inner senses. The outer senses exist only in the present tense. The inner senses can sense into the past and the future. The external organs and the internal organs, they're both there. You can't see, taste, or smell air. You can see it if the tree blows. You can see it if there's wind. If there's, you can see the effect of air. You can taste if there's something in it, but just air, just pure air. You can't see it or taste it or smell it, but you can feel it, right? So this is the order of creation as it's described. You can't taste or smell light, but you can see light. And you can feel the heat, the warmth of it. You can't taste it or smell it. You can't smell water, but you can see, you can hear, feel, see, and taste it. And you can hear, see, feel, taste, and smell the earth. So this is how they're all connected to each other. And that's the order out of which they came. The order of evolution was, first there was sound and space, then there was air and touch. Touch created air. And then out of air comes light, and out of light comes water, and out of water comes earth. Okay. This is the most kind of like intellectually complicated one session that we have, because it's all these pieces and it's all this kind of logical stuff. And that's also why I made this slideshow. So this is what I just told you, right? Purusha and Prakriti touch each other. The gunas get stimulated. Mahat is the same as Buddha. Buddhi, it's another word for Buddhi. Buddhi creates ahankara. Sattva ahankara creates, oh gosh, why does this thing not go away? It never goes away? Okay, that's great. Okay, so sattva ahankara creates manas, and the indriyas, the gyan indriyas, the indriyas of cognition, and the indriyas of action, the karma indriyas. We'll see another one where rajas ahankara, this has it in between going down. It's not really like that. It's mediating between these two. It's basically the creation aspect that allows for these things to manifest. And tamas creates the sounds and the bhutas. So you think about, like, there's limitless energy that coalesces into form. That's tamas that does that. Tamas is the limitation that makes limitless energy become stuff, right? So this, I think, what we're going to do now, this shows the same thing a little bit in a different way. I want you guys, and maybe you've already started doing this, but I want to give you a few minutes just to map this out. So it's like a copying exercise, but I'd like you to take this map, recreate it in whatever way you want to. You can make it like sideways, upside down, backwards, whatever, and write some things about each of these things, right? Just fill it out, draw some pictures, like make yourself a beautiful map of this. This is not like a final project that you have to turn in. It's more about the exercise of doing it, because that's how you're going to learn what these words mean, is you're going to write them down. And that's why I'm saying, like, when you write Prakriti, don't just write Prakriti. What is it? What is Prakriti? So write a few things about it. Draw a picture of it. Manas, where it says mind here on this one, the word is manas. And manas is the thing that interfaces between the senses and the I am, the ahankar. So there's basically like the senses: hearing, touching, seeing, tasting, smelling, speaking, holding, moving, procreating, eliminating, the karmendriyas. The mind, manas, is the thing in between all those raw senses that interprets them for the ahankar. So buddhi, manas, and ahankar are considered the internal organs of perception. So the indriya, the word indriya means like organ of perception. So gyanendriyas are the cognitive organs of perception, and the karmendriyas are the active organs of perception. And they're all external, objective, outside. They're reaching outside. They're connecting to the outside world. They're hearing and touching and tasting and holding and moving and interacting with the outside world. Buddhi, ahankara, and manas are inside. And they're like the wardens, and the rest are the gates. So the sense of hearing, touch, taste, smell, moving, holding, procreating, eliminating, those are like the gates. And it's the organs of speech. So when it says active instrument, speaking, holding, moving, it's like voice is the organ of speech. Hand is the organ of holding. Feet are the organs of movement. Procreation is the organs of generation. Elimination is the organs of elimination. So those are the gates.
What is the difference between Mahat and Ahankara?
Mahat or buddhi is the first principle of individuation, intelligence, and discrimination. So it's the capacity to discern, but it's not coalesced yet into an I. It's like when I was saying about there's the water and the wave starts to rise up. It's not, is it really a wave? Is it really its own individual thing? We don't know yet. It's just this kind of swelling. And then it becomes a wave. It becomes its own individual wave up that's differentiated from the rest of the ocean. Yeah, exactly. When I said before about free will and ahankar and all that stuff, I mean, this is a fairly developed psychological framework. It's not that rudimentary. And I think within kind of modern understanding of psychology, Sankhya would consider that most of what's being done is happening on the level of Prakriti. Most of our understanding of psychology is on the level of Prakriti. Because Purusha, this element of spirit, isn't generally understood and held in the modern psychological framework. This is not, obviously not exclusively true, but
I'd say more and more it's being folded in, but it's been a more mental, psychological, separate mind.
The point is just that this whole thing that we've kind of delineated, like the Western mind is just so amazing in its capacity to break things apart and study them, dissect them, take them apart. And so we've done that with everything. And Sankhya is basically like, yeah, all that's fine, but it's like that's all the machine. Where's the spirit in the machine? What is it that brings the machine to life? Why you keep breaking the machine apart? You can't, I don't remember where this saying comes from, but if you take apart a car, theoretically you could put the car back together again. If you take apart an elephant, you have a mess. You can't put the elephant back together again because that's not like organic things. So we're real good at like taking things apart and putting them back together, but the things that we don't know about are, okay, so why can't you put an elephant back together again? What is the animating principle in the elephant? Where does that come from? Why does the elephant exist in the first place? That's where science falls apart. It's the Big Bang phenomenon. Like, we know everything. What happened before that? I don't know. All right, I'm gonna move forward, and if you're still going, continue, and there's gonna be more drawing to come. So, yeah, please.
It looks like, to me, there's two aspects of the ahankara. One is the external things, which are from the mind, and the other is the subtle elements, which are like external things, but that are in the world. So the one side is the external things within us as individuals, and the other is the external things that make up matter in the universe.
So you remember that sattva is illuminating. Yeah. So all of these cognitive senses and active instruments are illuminative. They provide knowledge. They provide awakening. They show us stuff. Tamas is limiting. So the subtle elements and the gross elements that come from them are limitations on the infinite flow of energy throughout space. So that's, so the sattvic side of things is the pathway of illumination and awakening and seeing. Awakening, maybe that's not the right word, but the pathway of illumination through which we see. And the other is the pathway of limitation, where things get coalesced into a limited form. And what this next slide shows is what I spoke about on the first day, which is that there was an involution through which the Purusha embedded itself inside of Mahat, inside of Ahankara. These are the nesting dolls. Mahat, Ahankara, Manas, the Karmendriyas, the Gyanendriyas, the elements inside. And then the process that Sankhya says, because remember this is about suffering. You can get lost in like, oh, and this and this and this and that, and the tanmatras and the mahabhutas and all. It's like, oh, right, hold on. There's a purpose here, and it's to alleviate suffering. So what it says is the way that we get free is that we climb back up the ladder. We go from the most gross to the more subtle, to the mind, to the ahankar, to the manas, and then we differentiate between buddhi and purusha. We tell the difference. At a certain point, this is what I was going to say before. What's the difference between ahankara and purusha? Right? You were asking that, aren't they both the I am?
Yeah.
That's the question. When you answer that question, the Yoga Sutra says this very clearly, differentiating between sattva and purusha. When you differentiate between sattva and purusha, you're done. You're done. So that's, we can talk about that, but to actually realize the difference is freedom. That's the breakthrough.
Could you talk a little bit about Rajasic and what that? Yeah.
Like why it's showing up on the chart in the way that it is, or just
like what does that mean by impelling?
Yeah, like
What's impelling what?
Impelling, like causing things to move, agitating, restless movement. So it's basically like the sattvic pathway. That's what I was saying to Dory. There's the sattvic pathway that leads to these, we can say, organs of illumination, right? And there's the tamasic pathway that leads to the limitation or coalescence of things. Rajas is the thing that makes all that happen. Rajas is the active force that allows those things to create themselves, to become. Anything that moves is Rajas. Everything in the universe is made up of these gunas, all of them, nothing is just sattvic, nothing is just tamasic, nothing is just rajasic. They're all made up of all of them. All three of them exist in everything in different qualities. The Bhagavad Gita does insinuate that, and the Yoga Sutras, that the path to illumination is a path from tamas through rajas to sattva, and that living a sattvic life, a life of purity, of clarity, of illumination, is the path. And then it says that beyond sattva is the state of nistrigunyatita, beyond the gunas. That the purusha, and this is again, the purusha is beyond the gunas, right? So the gunas influence prakriti, the realm of prakriti. Purusha is beyond the gunas, and we are purusha. That's the thing to remember in all of this. Is like there's prakriti and there's purusha, and purusha is what we actually are. It's not some other thing out there. Mm-hmm. It's what we actually are, and so.
But it's discerning and
finding that, because it's all merged up, it's all mushed up in everything. It thinks it thinks the linga sharira thinks that it is purusha. The ahankar thinks that it is purusha. So it's differentiating. That's what buddhi does. That's why we go back to buddhi, and then buddhi has the capacity to differentiate between sattva and purusha. And that's this upward climbing. And this is the path of Sankhya. This is what Sankhya describes as. Here we go with the gunas. Okay, so sattva is the revealing power, rajas is the projecting power, and tamas is the veiling power. So limitation, projection, and revelation. These are also the three powers of Shiva. And I'm going to here's another one. This is the slide that I was talking about. So it's a bunch of stuff: balance, harmony, positive, peace, clarity, light, creativity. And rajas is like movement, activity, energy, excitement, agitation, anxiety, egoism, desire, all this stuff. And interestingly, like I said, the word apriti that is used in the Sankhya, apriti, is like unfriendliness, like painful enmity. It's the translation of that word. and tamas. So now just take a little bit of time to draw a little, like whatever you want about the gunas. In the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, there's a story, or a verse that says that the great mother, who is red and white and black, or white and red and black. So they're talking about Prakriti, who is white, sattva, rajas, and tamas, red and white and black. The great mother who is red and white and black, she has two children, and one is dependent on her and the other is totally free. Something like that. So it's talking about all the buddhi is the dependent one and the purusha who is free. And then the next verse says that there's two birds sitting on a tree, and one is eating the fruits of the tree and the other is watching. So it's Prakriti is the one who's eating the fruits of the tree. It's actually engaged in the eating, and Purusha is the one that just watches and experiences everything through the witnessing and the observation. And it says something about the soul that is suffering. When it realizes that its nature is the witness, then it is free from suffering. When it realizes that it is that bird that's watching. Something, maybe it's like when it has its fill. As there is this sense in Sankhya and in this Upanishad of like there's a ripening that happens. You know, it's not like anybody should be enlightened before they're enlightened. Anybody should be done this thing before it takes, we're here. You have to like go through it all. You have to have all the pain and all the pleasure and all the agitation and all the disappointment and all these experiences. You have to go through all that first. You don't just get to skip. You don't just get to skip ahead. There's a big, especially, I think, the more kind of mindfulness and Buddhism and yoga become pervasive in our modern culture, there's this sense of like, I should be where I'm not. I should be more evolved than I am. I should be. And then people kind of fake it. Oh, yeah, I know all these things. I know, I'm but that's not really helpful. It doesn't really do anything. If we haven't had the experience or the realization, pretending like we had it, there's no value to it. And there's nothing wrong with having not had it. There's no problem. Nothing's broken.
I'm the parent.
I
should know.
Yeah.
I noticed there's a full need to be to actually go the other way. Because like a sort of like, I'm here, I'm not gonna just blip out of this. Like I really, I almost feel like a pull. In the yogic tradition, there's a lot of pull towards this, right? And I almost notice in myself a pull towards the earth, towards being, towards those things, in a counterbalance to that sort of pull up and out. Yeah. I don't know how to explain it other than that. It's like an authentic response. It's like a natural response. I don't know that it's a healthy response. I'm just saying it is my natural response.
What I was trying to say when I started saying this is that there is this sense in yoga traditions often that the better way is the higher way to get up and out quicker. But it's the implication in the Sankhya Karika is it's all fine. We're just taking our time. We're all moving in the direction. It's okay. There's no rush, If there's a story about Swami Kripalu, that he was standing at the edge of a cliff and ready to jump off, and he was just like, I'm done. And a lot of like yoga aspirants will reach a point where they're just like, I'm done. And then this awakening happens in that space of being done. He was done. Orva rukameva bandhanan. When the cucumber is ripe, it falls from the vine. So, but when it's not ripe, it's not ripe. It's okay. It's not a problem. And then that being, Swami Kripalu can teach a lot of people. The potter's wheel is still spinning. I didn't know Swami Kripalu, so I can't vouch for I don't know if he had a pass of enlightenment. I don't know if he graduated with the certificate or not. But, if in that case, the being who has reached that state. The potter's wheel is still spinning, they're still embodied, and they can offer a lot to people. I heard that, but there's a lot of spiritual traditions that have taken these teachings and taken them in many different directions. And I mentioned Adi Shankara at some point, I think, maybe during the Upanishads talk, who was a spiritual genius. He actually only lived till he was like 35. And he was he still is like one of the most famous spiritual teachers in India. He lived around the 8th century in Tamil Nadu. He was a non-dualist, and he basically said, he took all these teachings and said, the best thing anybody can ever do for themselves is get up and out of here, because this is Maya, this is all delusion, it's all an illusion, and we need to get out. And he influenced a lot of people, and he was a spiritual genius. I mean, he compiled and synthesized incredible teachings. Like, he was teaching when he was like 18, wandering around homeless, teaching hundreds of people, thousands of people. But his teaching had that flavor. And then there were other teachers, the tantric traditions particularly, who went in the other direction and said, we don't need to go anywhere. It's all here. The Abhinavagupta was a spiritual genius, wrote this incredible texts about, and basically like brought forward Kashmir Shaiva Tantra around the 10th century. And he said, everything is Shiva. Everything is absolute radiance already. That's what we are. We just have to awaken to the fact. We just have to realize that that's what we are. We don't have to go anywhere. Like, realizing that we're Shiva doesn't require getting up and out of this realm of existence. This realm of existence is inherently the divine. So there was many different teachings going in many different directions. Modern yoga is this kind of mashup of all of it. And a lot of modern yoga teachers will just kind of layer these different teachings on top of each other, not realizing that they're smashing stuff together that didn't really evolve together and is a little incoherent sometimes. And they don't, there's a kind of a lack of superficial understanding, and these words, kind of throwing these words and concepts out there without an understanding of where they came from and what the implications of them are. There's the Sri Aurobindo's teaching. What he says is that his teaching is a weaving together of Tantra and Vedanta. And Vedanta is what Adi Shankara, it's not just Adi Shankara, but that's basically his teaching. So this kind of non-dualistic, everything is one, but we don't have Tantra, we don't have to get up and out. So it's like and he said Tantra often would lose itself in the machinery, because Tantra becomes very ritualistic. You can do all these things and you can do all these rituals, and he would say Tantra loses itself. You kind of get lost in all the different practices of Tantra, and why are you doing that? Like, what's going on here? And so it's like he takes the Tantra and merges it with this non-dual framework of everything is one. We are all the divine remembering itself, and puts it into the framework of evolution. So it's Vedanta and Tantra in the framework of evolution. That's how he kind of summarizes his
everyday life.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm going to commune with divinity when I'm doing these 15 rituals. I'm going to be in worship every minute.
While I'm washing the
day.
dishes.
While we're doing anything.
And the decisions of life, making the decisions of life from a place of depth and intentionality and sincerity. And that transforms one's life, one's mind, one's surroundings. Like the transformation and the divinization of the earth comes through each of us taking on that responsibility of the choices that we make and remaining in sacred consciousness. Okay, let's just see. I think so this is a little movie for your viewing enjoyment. It moves a little fast, but I kind of thought after talking about all this stuff, it's not that long, it's like 5 minutes or something, that after talking about all this stuff, it kind of condenses it all, and it might be good for you, just like, you might be halfway through like, well, what is going on here? But, it's just another way of seeing all this stuff. So I'm going to turn this on. I hope you can hear it. I didn't think about that. And the volume's up as loud as it can go, but This is like the slide. I don't know. So let's just try and see if you guys can hear, and if you can't, I'll fix something. Oh, right. Okay. Well, the audio is just the sound, actually. Nobody talks. I think you might have to read. I can't remember. I think you have to read it.
Maybe somebody should read it out loud.
Let's just see. Let's see what happens. Get out of the way. We can watch it twice if we need to. Yeah. Ancient Indians did not use the word evolution in the same sense as the proponents of modern something. They saw it as in much broader terms, not only an evolution to another within nature, while its overall energy-matter component remained constant. It's a little complicated. According to Sankhya, nature is a blind force which works mechanically like an automaton. All the causes and effects are already latent in it, so it creates nothing new, but brings out what is already there in it as an embedded program. Let's see how things evolve in nature as per Sankhya, at the most elementary and structural level within the building blocks called the tattvas. Remember, the tattvas are all the stuff. Nature is triggered into action when it comes into contact with Purusha or the individual soul. The differentiation of Prakriti begins when it comes into contact with Purusha. The contact is the trigger for Prakriti to spring into action. The first development within nature upon the contact is disequilibrium in the three qualities or gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. The soul does nothing. Mahat is the universal. I'm just going to go back to that for a second.
Pause it.
Pause that.
So Mahat is the universal level,
Yeah.
and Buddhi is the individual level, the name for the individual level. This is dynamic consciousness, so Prakriti, when merging with Purusha. The Buddhi reflects the consciousness of the soul as the moon reflects the sun. So this is where things get confusing, right?
Say that sentence again.
The Buddhi reflects the consciousness of the soul as the moon reflects. So the moon doesn't shine. When you look at it, you might be confused and be like, "Oh, look, the moon is shining."
And last night it was very bright.
It was shining last night. The moon was shining, but it actually wasn't. The Buddhi is the same way. It reflects the Purusha, the radiance of the Purusha, but it doesn't actually shine because it's Prakriti. It doesn't act. And when we say reflects the consciousness, so we're talking about the moon reflects the light of the sun. Buddhi reflects the consciousness of Purusha. So when you look at Buddhi, you're like, wow, it's conscious, but it's actually not. And then out of that, and the soul is untouched. It remains a witness always. And the Buddhi creates this ego sense. Ego creates the three. Well, no, the ego, right? The three different streams of ego are ahankara, are the sattvic, the rajasic, and the tamasic. Tamasic creates the tanmatras. The sattvic creates these two, and manas is also created by sattva. I mean, that's interesting because it seems to be saying, I think that's a mistake. Because it seems to be, it's got the rajas thing pointing at the karmendriyas, but that's not accurate. And it's got manas in with rajas, which is also not accurate. you know, YouTube.com. You may have heard of it. The Tanmatras then create the Mahabhutas, right? Sound creates ether, touch creates air, sight creates fire, taste creates water, smell creates earth. 24 tattvas, 5 karmendriyas, 5 gyanendriyas, 5 tanmatras, 5 mahabhutas, prakriti, buddhi, ahankara, and manas. The gunas are pervasive in all the tattvas and hence not counted separately. So they're not tattvas. There's the tattvas and there's the